Welcome to another episode of Your Revit Guy content, and today we'll be talking about creating links, which are very important in the Revit software for various reasons. If you're working with multiple disciplines, multiple parts of the project, different companies, all of those files are typically used in separate locations and they have to be brought together to make the project whole. As those projects are worked on by individual locations, they are linked together one at a time by different disciplines, structural, architectural, MEP, site work, all of those different types of elements of different softwares as well come together to make the project whole. Sometimes you'll have all the project's files separately, and then maybe you'll have one model that is a container model that you join everything together for printing, and that can be done as well. Let's look at all of the content elements that you have for linking in Revit. Let's check it out. In this architectural model, we're going to look at linking of multiple types of files into a single model for collaboration from other resources, other disciplines, and multiple colleagues working on a project. Going to the Insert tab, Link panel, you have various tools for link Revit files, link IFC, link CAD, link topography files, DWF markup, point cloud, Navisworks collaboration and coordination models, link PDF files, and link images. You can also go to a Manage Links button, which opens a new dialog box for Revit 2025, and you can also add all of those different types from this list as well. I'm starting from an architectural model where all of the exterior walls are created, and I'm going to link in some other file formats to continue the process. Going to add, I'll choose link CAD format, and in this dialog box I see a DWG file. At the bottom I see options for choosing to preserve the AutoCAD colors, invert them, or change everything to black and white. If you are just using the AutoCAD file as a reference, I recommend using the preserve colors so you can clearly see the difference between AutoCAD and Revit. If you are using them as a background or an overlay, I recommend using black and white. Layers can be brought in as all layers, visible layers last time it was saved, or a specified list of layers. I'm going to bring in all layers. Units can be brought in as auto-detected or a specified unit type. I'm going to leave it as auto-detected. Positioning can be brought in as center to center, origin, or shared coordinate. I'm going to bring it in as center to center, and you can place it at a specific level if necessary. Again, your only options in here are different CAD formats: DWG, DXF, format files, SAT file, DGN, microstation file, OBJ file, Rhino files, SketchUp files, STL still files, and step files. So all of those are different CAD format types of a vector graphics format. Loading that in, I see CAD formats as an option in this list. The options that you have with the CAD file linked in are that you can select the file. At the top, you can add more documents, of course. You can reload more options. So when you choose reload, very similar to AutoCAD's external reference manager, if there are changes to the CAD file externally outside of this file, choosing reload will bring those in to your document with any updated changes. Reload from actually allows you to choose a different file location or a different file type. If you are receiving different files from various users and you either want to replace that file or a new file name came in as an update without having to rename the file, you can actually choose a different file choosing reload from. You can unload the file, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. I'm going to close this dialog box temporarily, and we can see that the AutoCAD file did come in, but it is slightly off axis. You'll notice that the exterior of the walls are slightly out of location. You can simply use the move tool and physically move that from one location to another. As long as you have a static consistent point that you know where the object should move to, once you move that in place, it will stay in that location and not move. So even if the linked files are not brought in accurately as far as the coordinate position goes, you can relay them to other positions that are known or implied in the project. As I look at this CAD file link connection, I can clearly see that there are some interior walls here that were not part of my own Revit model currently. If I choose to select that CAD file and isolate it temporarily, I can see the CAD file and its relative colors shown here. So all of this information comes from that AutoCAD file. Whether this is a renovation of a building that you have an AutoCAD file from, or you're working with a consultant that is using AutoCAD, you can still bring their content in within use for your document. It's much easier to draft in Revit when you have something as an underlay to draft over top of instead of drawing everything from scratch. So if you can use it, I highly recommend. reset temporary hide and isolate, and you bring everything back. So I can use these AutoCAD walls to draw new content on top of, because the AutoCAD file is just two-dimensional vector graphics and it is not Revit three-dimensional content, so you still have to create the 3D modeled walls or other content if it's supposed to be shown in 3D. You can, however, use the AutoCAD file as a background or an underlay if you just want to see that two-dimensional content as a reference, but you're not going to show it in 3D or other areas. It can be used as just a reference of a portion of the building if you're not responsible for drafting the whole building. If you're not getting paid for modeling the whole building, you don't have to typically, unless you're stated to in the contract. Going back to the Manage Links dialog box, let's load a few other types of files here. I'm going to go back to the Revit option. In this list, I have some other disciplines. I have an MEP building. When you click on Revit models, your only options below are RVT files, other Revit models, and you can bring them in as center to center, internal origin to internal origin, shared coordinates, or project base point to project base point. I'm going to use project base point here since they should be the same, as they probably started with a similar template file, and that loads a Revit file here. Your options for locating the Revit file, again, you can choose to reload changes, unload, or remove the document completely from the file. When you choose reload, again, that's going to look for any updated changes to that linked file. Different from AutoCAD, if you have a linked file in the Revit model, it will not automatically notify you that there is a change to that Revit link. You have to be notified of that manually through some other means, messaging, email, or phone call, and then you have to come to this open dialog box and choose the Revit file, and then choose reload so that you can see any of the updated changes. However, you only need to do that if the file is already opened for that day and you are working on the file and a new change came in after you opened it that morning. If you open the file in the morning, it will automatically update any changes to the linked files at that time. So that's a process that doesn't usually need to happen unless a change came in later in the day, and it's going to affect your work for the remainder of the day. Otherwise, you can wait till the next day and see the update change reload. Choosing the Revit link file, you have options for setting the file type to be overlay or attachment. Typically, you want to set that to be overlay, because if you choose the attachment option and you are sharing your file with another discipline, whatever linked files are connected to your file as attachments will also be brought into their file as a Revit link. Typically, that's not something that you want to happen. That is called a circular reference, and you usually want to set that to be overlay unless there's a good reason not to. Also, you have options to set the path type to be absolute or relative. The absolute type means that wherever the location of that file is when you link it in, Revit will only look for that file location at that point. If it doesn't find the file, it will not load it and list it as unloaded until it's found in the right location, either manually or move back in that location. If you set the path type to be relative, which is recommended, Revit will look for that file name under the same file path that the host project was opened in. So as long as the linked file is in the subfolders or main folder of project file that it's hosted in, it should find that file name, especially if the project gets moved, relocated, or archived into a different folder name. So again, best practice is to use the reference type overlay and path type to be relative in most cases. If you want to not see any of these files for some reason or for an extended period of time, it is better to use the unload option instead of choosing to remove. Remove detaches it completely from the file, and to see it again later, you have to go through the whole process of adding it again at that time. There may be a number of settings, location, coordinate position, and visibility graphics that are stored in that linked file connection. If you remove or detach, it will remove those contents completely from the file, and you will have to redo it. It is a much better practice to choose unload, especially if you don't need to see it for some time, but you do want to see it again later. If I choose the CAD file and choose unload, its symbol changes here, status is unloaded. If I close this and look at the background, the AutoCAD file area has disappeared. Again, I did not delete it from the file, I've just hidden it for a time in the links location. So if I go back to Manage Links, choose the CAD format, choose Reload once more, the green checkbox shows back up as loaded. It will also look for any updates to that CAD file as needed, and then display the CAD file once more. You can see that in the background. So again, it's a better practice to unload the files, as many of those as necessary in the links, if you don't want to see them at the moment, but you do want to see it again later. Much better to keep it connected than detaching it completely. Additionally, the linked files do not impart any file size to the project when they're connected to the file. It's only a pointer to an external file location, and the file size that you'll see listed on the information area is only a link to the external file resource. It does not add that file size to your document, so it does not have any harm or problems when you're linking in multiple files. The only issue that you may see is when you open open the file day. Each of the linked files must open in whatever time frame that takes, and that is an exponential time frame because as you have more files loaded into your project as links, each of those files do have to open at that time, and that could cause an extended period of time for opening. And you may want to unload some of those files if you don't need to see them to expedite your opening process. Go back to Revit link, and I also have a structural model. I'm going to load that in as well. So I have two different Revit linked files. Close that for a moment, and I can see the structural file showed up in here. As I zoom into this area, I also have some light fixtures that comes from the link Revit model mep-building.rvt file. So all of those come from the external file location. That is the Revit links. This one shows as link Revit model building.rvt for the structural model. Since you are working with disciplines in different locations, typically in different companies or different areas of even your own company building, it's easier to separate the models by discipline and link them in later, usually for ease of access so you don't have too many people working in the same project. Revit is capable of that, but the fewer people that are in the same project file, it's better to not allow people to step on each other's toes per se. Separating them by discipline is a really good choice to allow everyone to have their own individual file that can then be linked in together. And it works successfully because you can collaborate together by having the other file disciplines linked in together, and you can see their work on top of yours. You're just able to draft and be able to visualize their content without manipulating it, or harm it is a more important factor. Going into a 3D view here, I'm going to change the view type to be wireframe. So in here I can see there are structural trusses. There's also ductwork from the MEP model, so all of that content does come in with your file resource. You can also select that content, typically by using a crossing window. Use the filter tool, and this will come in as the DWG file, and also Revit links will show separately. So if I click only the linked file content and then choose to isolate elements, I have all three of those objects listed individually. You don't need to manipulate them, but you may want to visualize them differently or modify their visualization. One resource that is typically used is as you select those files, you can right-click on those and choose Override Graphics in View by Element, and choose the option called Halftone. A very typical process in most working environments is to set the linked files to be halftone. Since you do not own them and you're not going to manipulate them, you can use the halftone option and it will gray them out, making them less vibrant and visible in the view. After the files have been made halftone, you can see that they are a lighter color, so that as you're working with other content, you can clearly see a difference between the linked files and your own Revit model content. Just kind of pushes it towards the background and becomes less vibrant and a little more out of the way as you're working on other content. Some other types of files you can bring in. A point cloud can also be brought in as either an RCS or an RCP file type. There's one. Again, you can choose your positioning. And I can see that shown up over here. This does not have much to do with this building, it's more of an example, but you can see how the point cloud does come in with three-dimensional content, even photogrammetry information, as a realistic photograph of the three-dimensional space. You can actually zoom into that area, select actual points and vectors. So if you have that information as a laser scan or a LiDAR scan, you can actually bring that content into your model. Very useful. You can also bring in coordination models as Naviswork file types. bring that in as well. This Naviswork file can be created from various resources as a complete coordination model. You can actually bring that into the Revit content, review that, either work from it or link to it, having it as a reference connection to your model or part of the site that you're working with to enhance the whole layout of your project. Turn those off right now. And again, they disappear. And then you can only see the Revit content remaining. Next, if you're working with sheets, you can actually bring in other content such as imagery or PDF files. Go to the Manage Links again, add image, choose this one here. Again, you can choose different image file types, bitmap, JPEG, PNG, or TIFF file. Click Open, locates that position. Again, you can set that to be absolute or relative for all of those file types. And you can place that position. Maybe you're creating a cover sheet or something like that, and you can load that into your document. Also, PDF files can be included. So if you have a general notes or some type of other list of information that you only have in PDF format, you can still bring that in. Choosing the PDF, opening that up. It does require you to choose one page at a time. So if it does have multiple pages, that would become separate locations of linking. You can choose the resolution from 72 to 600 dpi, dots per inch, as relative to the page size shown here. I'm going to bring in just page 1, click OK, select the file and choose the top to place instance. That lets me locate that here. And it works similar to a graphic, but it is vector text, so it does grow or shrink successfully without being dissolved by the resolution. I'm now looking at this overall site building area where you have multiple paths that could be the same building in multiple locations. So if you're working on a project that is going to be located in several positions, such as a project site or a campus, and the same building construction is going to be used multiple times, you don't have to model each building separately. You can create one master model, and then you can place multiple versions of those across the site to lay out the positioning. In this model, I'm going to link in each of those building models as Revit. And they're currently all located here. Selecting only the linked files. I have all 3 of those selected. Move those to the correct location. In this case, the corner of the site is the corner of this position. And then I'll just use the normal copy tool and lay this out from site to site. Copy it down here, actually rotate that orientation. And now going to a 3D view, you can see that the entire site layout has been built with all those buildings replaced and replicated from a single Revit model project. So if you're building an entire campus using the same building structure over and over again, You can lay out the site as a separate model and then link in all of the other files to it, completing that process altogether for printing or other exportation purposes. Thank you for joining us for this session of Your Revit Guide, where we're talking about links. I hope this content was very rewarding to you and informative. We look to see you next time for our next content. Thanks for joining us. Check out our previous videos below. Comment below and tell us more information you'd like to see covered in the Revit software.